people can start losing weight just by making better decisions.
Motivation is driven from the inside out.
Use flexibility as a tool. Rely on structure when it's helpful.
This is where we discuss the possibilities.
Hey guys, I'm Dr. Kori Propst, Wellness Director and Vice President of the Diet Doc. Welcome to the Diet Doc Life Mastery Podcast. I'm here with Dr. Joe Klemczewski, and we're continuing our kind of follow-up series from our conference, the 2018 Annual Owners Summit. And Joe, we're going to talk about metabolic positioning today. You did a really good presentation on this. I think all of our owners have heard of this concept before. It's a term that you coined early on to help us understand the most effective way to lose body fat. But maybe we could start with having you define it for our listeners. What is metabolic positioning?
Sure. I have to go all the way back to when I started my business, at least the brick and mortar version, which is when I was 27 years old. And I remember when I was trying to turn this small gym as a private training studio into a growing, thriving wellness center. And we had some phenomenal anchors in our community with clients, and I started adding staff. And I just remember these days where in between clients, I would be in my office just devouring these textbooks, things I had learned in college, graduate school, and all of that good stuff. All of a sudden, I had to teach this to clients and find a way to make it relatable. And so as I was going through all of the pathways of energy usage in the body and how your body even gets to stored body fat, it was, first of all, kind of profound. Even though I had gone through a lot of this stuff in school, like I said, when the rubber meets the road and you've got clients in front of you and you're trying to convey things that are meaningful, it just takes on a life of its own. So I had to find a way to do this. And I created this little chart, and I remember it had a picture of kind of an energy continuum. So your body can use carbohydrates or fat. And here's a little chart of, what blood sugar can do. And I had a picture of a stomach and a liver and muscle tissue. And I'm showing all of the flow of where your body gets energy. And that resonated really well. People responded to that. And I would get a lot of aha moments. And people would say in the middle of a consultation, "Oh my gosh, that's me. That's exactly what happens. I always get so hungry on that third or fourth day." So it just kind of evolved into, as you said, I probably wrote an article series at some point and had to define it. And so I called it metabolic positioning, which to me means getting your body into that metabolic position where you're using body fat is a larger percent of your energy. So you saw this as part of a lecture I did at the conference, but I know you're quite familiar because we've been working together for more than a decade. So how do you feel that it impacts people in explaining it this way?
Yeah, well, that diagram that you've referenced it's a pretty phenomenal piece of content that, when used with our clients, kind of rocks their world. They are able to understand where their bodies are, and I think the power that they have in putting themselves in this optimized place in order to do what they've never been able to do before. So it revolutionizes their understanding of fat loss. When I first came on board a decade ago, like you said, and you taught me what metabolic positioning was, and I watched you do consults and how you explained that continuum to people. I was putting myself in the position of the client. When I went to school and went through advanced nutrition, it was all just very formulaic. You plug in these numbers to figure out what amounts of calories you should eat in a day, but it wasn't broken down to go through the actual nuances of fat loss. And I think that the diagram not only helps the client understand why do we fluctuate, and what happens within that 1 to 5 day period once they are eating within a different caloric range. But as they go through the process of their weight loss journey, they can come back to it repeatedly to kind of ground themselves in what's actually happening here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say, if we could just kind of go through it briefly,
Mm-hmm.
I want people to understand that physiology doesn't work like flipping a switch. A lot of people think, oh, here's what's happening, then I'm going to change to this. Everything is so dynamic as your body is trying to maintain homeostasis. But if you can think of it as these pretty profound shifts, I think it'll make sense. And then you can see exactly where some ways of eating kind of fail to get you the best results, and some are improved. So, I do want to kind of back some of this up with the most current research. But if you just consider somebody who is maybe not losing weight right now, they're just getting ready to start their diet, so everything is just at a baseline. Well, you should assume that their glycogen levels, stored carbohydrates, are full. We typically have enough carbohydrates in our diet, and just calories alone are going to make sure our glycogen levels are full. So the body prefers glucose for energy, right? Like every cell in the body, 100 or so trillion cells, all prefer glucose as energy. And the fastest, easiest way to get that glucose into cells is glucose or carbohydrate in our food. So in our stomach, as our body's breaking that down, we're going to release blood sugar, and that's immediate glucose for cells. Well, in between meals, as blood is circulating through the liver, that's one of the first ways our body monitors blood sugar level. And so glycogen will be broken down in the liver, released into the bloodstream as a secondary source of energy. And then if you're active, because muscle glycogen, your liver stores about a day's worth of carbs. Your collective muscle tissue can store 2 to 4 days worth of carbs, but that's released much more effectively through direct usage. So it's not like I'm just going to sit here and my body's going to draw a lot of glycogen from muscle tissue. But if I'm working out, I will use it and then simply not replace it. Mm-hmm. So gradually, as you mentioned in that time frame, over 2, 3, 4 days, your stored carbohydrate levels are reducing. That's going to gradually increase the amount of body fat you're mobilizing. So the shift between hormones like insulin and glucagon, one is storing, one is retrieving or releasing body fat. And those are both produced and released all day long in different quantities depending on the environment. So that's why I said it's not like just flipping a switch. It's happening all day long. You can be storing and losing body fat simultaneously, systemically throughout your body, but you're looking at those percentages and those trends. So here's the first step. People start eating well, and in between meals, their body's going to start using stored glycogen, and then after a couple of days, stored body fat. So you get to that point now where you kind of hit a threshold where your body is going to release more body fat, and there's a pretty profound shift, because then your body goes into kind of a mini ketosis or a pre-ketosis level, where your body's now just going to keep mobilizing that body fat, and your body gets used to how much carbohydrate is there until maybe you rock the boat and dump a bunch more back in.
So can I ask you a question real fast, Joe?
Yes.
Are there certain symptoms that a client may experience when they hit that switch where the percentages really change?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of people, simply because they're eating better for the first time, if they're drinking more water, if they're eating more protein, if their meal timing is a little bit more regulated, they may just feel amazing and never hit any speed bump whatsoever. Other people, when they're getting glycogen depleted, they could feel some hunger, even some hypoglycemia. Mm-hmm. And if you just get through that day, then you generally hit another day where it's like, wow, now I feel amazing. And it's almost like the lights come on. Yeah. So I think clients are going to hit one of those two places.
It's really interesting. I tend to see it happen more often with females, where they have that very discrepant, like I feel like I'm like antsy, more anxious, appetite is higher, like I really, really, really want to eat right now. And I do get them through it in just the way that you described, preparing them. We need to drink more water. We need to be really careful about how we're combining your foods and eating on a regular basis. But have you noticed that? Is there a difference in the way, I know there's probably a difference in the way genders perceive. We could get into the psychology of it, but do you find that that's more common with females when you?
I do, and I think perhaps I kind of lean toward the male side and just say that I think more guys are used to eating so crappy that just some of those increases of quality and timing improve them so much that I think they just feel better. But I mean, it could definitely be something with shifts in the menstrual cycle, hormones, all that. I mean, very, very probable.
Okay.
But here's what happens. So when people get to that level, it's taking you 2 to 4 days to start using an appreciable amount of body fat. And the biggest problem I see in our culture is that then people have a weekend out, you're drinking some beer, you're doing something, and you'll refill those glycogen stores, maybe once a week, twice a week, or a lot of people got in the habit of having a cheat day, cheat weekend, that kind of thing. And I'm telling you, it doesn't take more than, a pretty solid day of eating to refill those glycogen stores. And now you're back to square one. And the problem is, and this is where we can make the claim, with the same amount of calories, if you just get into that metabolic position and stay there, you can lose weight so much faster, is because instead of just using and restoring glycogen, you get through that threshold and then you're using a higher amount of body fat. And
wait, so say that again. The same amount of calories compared to like what? Same amount of calories as when you started eating better, or?
Yeah, so let's say just in a week, I have a certain amount of calories. Let's say in 1 week I've had, 15,000 calories. Okay. Well, if I'm dieting haphazardly, just eating less, but then I binge or have a big day and all this stuff, you could be going back and forth. Whereas if you spread those calories out, assuming a calorie deficit that's appropriate, but you get through that metabolic positioning switchover, then you're going to be using a higher percent of body fat consistently instead of constantly refilling glycogen stores and having to use that for the next 2 or 3 days.
Got it. Okay.
So the first thing that I think anybody thinking through normal culture would say, okay, if that's the case, looking at these cultural trends and fads, then why not just have zero carbohydrates? Let's just go through that glycogen depletion really, really fast and use a much higher percent.
Why not do the keto diet, Joe?
Absolutely. And I'll keep saying this after a pretty thorough literature review a year and a half ago. I came to the conclusion that ketogenic diets are not completely opposed to low-fat diets. It's not one is first and one is last, best or worst. In every study I've seen, low-carb diets come in a close second to low-fat diets in terms of cardiovascular risk markers, the amount of body fat lost, especially when you're looking at inpatient studies where you're not relying on self-reporting. That's when a low-fat diet kills ketogenic dieting. But I understand people's enthusiasm. I mean, if carbs are what's holding us up, let's just get rid of them. The problem is, it's also been researched that having a zero carb or very low carb diet is the fastest way to suppress your metabolism, lose lean body mass, and binge. It's the least compliance of any, and it even creates the most eating disorders. Harvard did a study on that. So it's so difficult and impractical, but you can take some of those principles. I'll give you an example. Somebody I was having dinner with this weekend said, hey, a friend of mine wanted me to ask you about this diet. And it was just a version of ketogenic dieting. And he said it works for him. He's lean, he's healthy. And I said, there's no way he's done this for a couple of years, as my friend stated. You can't eat on zero carbs that long. And so he texts his friend and he said, oh, he reloads on the weekend. Well,
Okay.
that's not ketogenic dieting. That's a low carb diet for 5 days, and then you're becoming sane again, which will spike your metabolism back up, prevent muscle loss, and all of that. So, this is where definitions matter.
Yeah.
And in our own program owners forum today, somebody brought up a book saying, "Hey, what do you guys think about this book? Have you heard about it?" And of course, it was just another recycled ketogenic, type diet, now coupled with a form of intermittent fasting. And I said, after reading some of the reviews and the book jacket and all of that, the claim is that the old calories in versus calories out myth or failed this or that, that's just physiology. Just because you say that you're going to be ketogenic or intermittent fasting, you still have to have a calorie base that is lower than your expenditure.
I had a friend who asked me that very question. Well, who said, "Well, I thought that if you were on a ketogenic diet, you could eat as much as you want." Yeah, and right. I thought, no, I don't exactly know how that would work. It is at a baseline level, calories first. If you're eating more than your body can process, you're going to gain body fat. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
Well, here's an anecdotal story of how this plays out. I had a bodybuilding competitor come to me, and he was eating a twice a day intermittent fasting ketogenic diet. So imagine trying to get an appreciable level of protein in 2 meals and no carbs. So there's a ton of fat. So this guy's having, maybe 100 grams of fat and 75 grams of protein twice a day. And he wanted me to help him get ready for a contest in 4 months. And so here's what happened. I said, okay, I'm going to help you, but you have to trust me. And we first moved from 2 meals a day to 3. And we added a little bit of starch, took away a little fat. Then we moved to 4 meals a day. We ended up stopping at 5 because I said, I'm not going to make you eat 7 or 8 times a day. I just want you to trust me on this. So over the course of those 4 months, we moved his calories up a full 30% while he lost 20 pounds of body fat and regained 3 pounds of lean body mass. All this done on a DEXA scanner. So consider that. Getting down to 3 or 4% body fat when you shouldn't be able to gain muscle, you're just trying to survive without losing muscle. He regains muscle. He should be having to reduce calories, right? Because normal metabolic adaptation through a dieting process, I don't care how good your diet is, that's going to happen, yet we increased it by 30%. So what does that tell you about his ketogenic intermittent fasting diet?
Yeah, what were the implications of him doing that? That his metabolism was in the toilet.
He was in a constant state of metabolic suppression and struggling to keep the lean body mass he had. And as soon as we were able to increase carbs, which there is a good part to insulin, insulin's there for a reason. Yeah. It's there to shuttle energy into cells to be used, which is the definition of metabolism. So again, it's so easy to just throw the baby out with the bathwater with these fads. And especially when you get doctors behind them and a research study that may be 30% incorrect with self-reporting, there's just so much absolute bullshit to wade through. And the average person is not going to say, hey, let's look at the last 20 years of research and look at all of the big data and make conclusions that way. We're looking at a headline at a time.
Okay, so I want to summarize what you just said because I don't want people to get confused. Because I think there's this misconception, and I hear it all the time, that in order to lose body fat, you need to eat more food. And did you have something?
No, well, I mean, first of all, let's stop there.
It depends, right? It depends on the context. If your metabolism is very, very suppressed, then yes.
Like you said, this was a very unique situation where he was starving himself on an intermittent fasting, 0 carb diet. So his metabolism was suppressed. I did not have to increase his food to make him lose weight. I had to get him eating more carbs to lose weight.
Okay.
And I had to get him to stop eating 1,000 calories in one meal. I mean, when you're throwing in 100
Right.
grams of fat and 50 to 75 grams of protein in one meal, 90% of that's going to be stored as fat.
So okay, correct me if I'm wrong. As you slowly raise his carbohydrates, you're probably lowering the amount of fat he's consuming and maybe the protein as well. And through that process, his metabolism is increasing. And okay.
So that is a unique scenario, and you're right. I don't want to confuse people thinking you have to eat more. You have to eat carbs to have your maximum metabolism and your maximum lean body mass, which is metabolically fueled tissue.
Okay.
And it's all about, he was just being so inefficient with his energy processing.
Okay, but so number one, carbs. We need carbohydrates to be at our highest metabolic capacity possible. And not everyone can eat a ton of carbohydrates and lose body fat as effectively. Now, that's part of metabolic positioning, right? Figuring out the amount of carbohydrates that are going to be appropriate for us as individuals based on our genetics, on our activity levels. Okay.
It is not unreasonable for me. Let's say I had 50 clients right now.
Mm-hmm.
I could have some women eating 50 to 75 grams of carbs a day, which is extremely low, but it's still 50 to 75 grams. It's not zero. I could have some on 125 to 150 grams of carbs a day, some even higher. Men could range anywhere from, maybe 150 to 300. I've had clients eating 1,000 grams of carbs a day. Carbs are not the enemy. It's just the context. If you want to be athletic, if you want to worry about performance, you have to have some energy substrate that your body has evolved to use. Carbohydrates are the most efficient energy source. Now, can you survive and can you live without them? Of course.
Mm-hmm.
We can adapt to anything,
Mm-hmm.
but that doesn't mean it's the best way to eat or to diet.
Okay, I have one question for you. It may seem kind of out of left field, but I think it's related. So you hear all about these like exogenous ketones that people are consuming. And can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think there's a lot of confusion about them. Are they good? Are they bad? Like, what is the freaking point to use them?
It's basically just a recycling of MCTs, medium chain triglycerides, or other fats. In any fat you consume, you could call a ketogenic supplement because it's not a carbohydrate. It's a ketogenic supportive, supplement. But if you're going to have no carbohydrates, is this a good energy source? It's okay. I would prefer you have something that your body could actually use that have some kind of micronutritional health value. But if you just need a quick supplement and you're on a ketogenic diet, yes, you can consume those.
Well, a lot of people, I think, are using them when they're not on a ketogenic diet. They're not on super low carbohydrates. So what are they doing?
Well, I'm assuming they're just trying to have a low glycemic index energy.
Okay.
And again, this could be another topic for another day. Yeah. Some of the principles we can bring over. Again, I am not totally anti-ketogenic principle. Yeah. I'm anti using that as an entire way of eating because it's inferior. There are some effects that are just not efficient, and it creates the number one amount of binge eating disorder in people. So I don't want people to diet that way, but is there something we can learn? Are there some principles we can apply? Absolutely.
And I've always appreciated that you've gone there, and I've had clients too, and even owners who before when they're coming on board have asked, like, do you promote intermittent fasting or ketogenic dieting? Are these things that we would be able to do with our clients, or can we try that, Kori? And we're open to all of those things because, like you said before, each one has certain benefits to it, positive implications. And over the long term, though, that's what we're looking at in terms of, is this sustainable? Can we adhere to this as a lifestyle? So it really, I think it comes down to understanding what the research is showing and working with each individual, based on what they need and what's going to work for them in an enduring way. So, but at a ground level, carbs are good.
Yeah, well, and maybe that'll be a great topic for another day, where we just go through several studies comparatively and look at what researchers find, instead of just throwing them in a pop culture book. But here's the big thing that I think a lot of people want, and I'll kind of close with this.
Sure.
It's easier for us if we just have some bumpers, the bowling lane bumpers. Just as long as I stay between these rails, I'm going to be safe. And if I just say I can just throw carbs out, eat anything I want, that keeps me safe, I can do that. I don't have to think that much. Intermittent fasting or restricted eating, if I just eat during these 8 hours, 3 meals, I don't have to think. It's just done for me. The weight just comes off. The problem is always, as you said, sustainability. Are you going to eat that way forever? What happens when you stop? Can you eat that way every day now, realistically? So if you can, fantastic, keep those bumper rails. But if you want to learn how to eat in a sustainable, flexible way, you can do just about anything if you learn what your metabolic capacity is, and then learn these principles to get into these positions metabolically where your body's more efficient.
Yeah. So science first, and then applied to
Always.
our bodies. Yeah, and metabolism. Awesome. Any final words, Joe?
I look forward to hitting this topic a couple more times from different angles, because it's pretty exhaustive.
It's dense, isn't it? It's fun to talk about. All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us this episode of the Life Mastery Podcast. Dr. Joe, thank you again. We'd love for you guys to share and like and send us your comments and feedback. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you.